My fiancée wanted to send my kids to boarding school so her alcoholic brother could live in my house. I kicked her out that night. And now she's crying at my door after he stole $15,000 from her and vanished. I'm 38 years old. I have two incredible kids who are 12 and 10, and 3 years ago I lost my wife in a car accident that basically destroyed us as a family. We went through therapy, through the stages of grief, through all of that, and eventually we got to a point where we weren't crying every night anymore, where we could talk about her without our hearts breaking into 1,000 pieces. I thought I'd never meet anyone again. Honestly, because how do you meet people when you're a single father of two kids who need you 24/7? But then, like 2 years ago, I went to a barbecue at some friend's house. One of those events where I normally don't want to go because I feel uncomfortable being the only single parent surrounded by couples, but my kids forced me to go because they said I was home alone all the time and needed to get out. And that's where I met Lauren. Lauren was 34, worked in marketing for a tech company, and I'm not going to lie, she was gorgeous and super charismatic, like one of those people who lights up a room when they walk in. We talked all night at that barbecue, and she told me about her life, her work, her hobbies, and she seemed genuinely interested in me and my kids when I told her about them. She didn't ask weird questions or make a horrified face when I mentioned I had two children, which was already a point in her favor because, trust me, that scares a lot of people away. She asked for my number, we started dating, and things went well for a while, really well. We'd go out to dinner when my in-laws could watch the kids, we'd go to the movies, normal couple things, and after like 3 months, I officially introduced her to Logan and Grace. The first few months with the kids were good. I mean, Lauren made an effort to connect with them. She'd ask them about school, play video games with Logan, help Grace with her art projects, that kind of thing. Logan was like 10 at the time and Grace was 8, and they seemed to accept her. Well, although Logan was always more cautious, more observant, like he was analyzing everything Lauren did and said. I thought it was just his way of being, the protective older brother who wants to make sure nobody hurts his family. But looking back, I think Logan saw things I didn't want to see, because I was too excited about having someone in my life again. After a year and a half of dating, things got serious. Lauren started staying at my house longer, sometimes the whole week, and I thought maybe it was time to take the next step. I talked to my kids about the possibility of marrying Lauren, and they said it was okay, that they wanted me to be happy, although Logan didn't seem very convinced, if I'm being honest. But I was already decided. So one day I took her to the park where I used to go with my wife. Probably wasn't the best idea to choose that place, but it was special to me. And I proposed. She said yes immediately, got super excited. Started calling her, friends, planning the wedding, all of that. I was happy, the kids were. Well, they were happy that I was happy, let's say. But then things started to change, and it was gradual, like it wasn't overnight, but more like a slow progression that I didn't notice until it was too late. Lauren started making comments about the house, about how we needed to redecorate, about how there was too much kid stuff everywhere, about how we needed to make space for her things when she officially moved in after the wedding. At first I thought they were normal comments. A woman wanting to put her touch on her future home, nothing major. But then she started suggesting we take down photos of my late wife, that we put away some of the kids' toys, that we turn the playroom into an office for her. And I told her, wait, the kids need their space. This is their home. And she'd respond that, yes, of course, but it was also going to be our home and we needed space for us as a couple. Then one day, like 6 months after the engagement, Lauren mentioned her brother Derek. She told me Derek was going through a rough time, that he'd lost his job, that he was struggling with some personal issues. He later found out the personal issue was alcohol, but at the time she made it sound like he was just depressed or something, and that he needed family support. I said okay, that I understood, that family is important, and I asked her how we could help. She looked at me with that smile that I now recognize as manipulative, but at the time seemed sweet to me, and said he just needed a place to stay for a while, maybe a few months, until he got back on his feet. I thought maybe she wanted Derek to stay with her at her apartment, so I said that seemed fine, that it was good to help family. But no, that's not what she had in mind at all. One night we were having dinner, the four of us, Lauren, me, Logan, and Grace, and Lauren casually mentioned something about boarding schools. She said something like, some of my coworkers sent their kids to boarding schools, and they did super well. They learned independence, made friends from all over, the kind of experience that really builds character. Logan immediately stopped eating and looked at me, and I saw the panic in his eyes. But Lauren kept talking like nothing, saying that maybe it was something we should consider for Logan and Grace, that it would give them incredible opportunities. I said no thanks, that my kids were going to stay home with me, that I wasn't interested in sending them anywhere, and she laughed like I was joking and changed the subject. But Logan didn't forget that conversation, and that night he came to my room and asked me if I was going to send him away, and I promised him never, that he and Grace were my #1 priority and they would always live with me in our house. But Lauren didn't drop the subject there. Over the next few weeks, she kept bringing up boarding schools, always casual, always like she was just exploring options. And I kept telling her I wasn't interested. Until one night, after the kids went to bed, she sat down with me in the living room and told me we needed to talk seriously. I thought she was going to talk about the wedding or about moving in or something like that, but no. She told me that Derek really needed our help, that he was in a desperate situation, and that she thought the best solution would be for Derek to move into my house, our house after the wedding, and that to make room for him, Logan and Grace should go to a boarding school. Just for a while, she said. Just until Derek got stabilized and could get his own place again. I sat there on the couch, looking at her like she'd gone crazy, because seriously, had she just suggested that I send my kids away so her alcoholic unemployed brother could have their room? I asked her if she was joking, and she told me no, that she was completely serious, that Derek was her family and needed help, and I should understand that. I told her, Lauren, my kids are my family. They're my absolute priority, and I'm not sending them anywhere, especially not to make room for someone else. She got angry, told me I was selfish, that I didn't understand how hard it was for Derek, that as her future husband I should support her family too. And I responded that supporting family didn't mean displacing my own children from their home, that if Derek needed help we could look for other options, but my kids weren't going anywhere. I thought after that conversation she'd let it go, that she'd understand that was a line I wasn't going to cross. But like 2 weeks later, on a Saturday afternoon, we were all home, the kids were playing in the yard, and Lauren was with me in the kitchen when the doorbell rang. I opened the door, and there was this guy, like 32 years old, with 2 big suitcases, smelling like old beer, and with that attitude of a guy who hasn't worked in years and has no plans to start soon. It was Derek. Lauren had invited him without telling me anything, and Derek was acting like he already lived there. He walked in without me inviting him, left his suitcases in the entrance, looked around and said something like, "Nice place, where's my room?" I looked at Lauren completely incredulous and said, "What's going on here?" And she said, "Well, Derek needed a place to stay urgently, and I thought we could discuss it in person. It's easier to say no when it's just an abstract idea, but when you see someone who really needs help, it's different, right?" I told Derek I was very sorry, but he couldn't stay, that I hadn't discussed this with Lauren and we didn't have space for him. Derek laughed and said, "Come on, man. Lauren told me you have like 4 bedrooms here. Surely you can make space for a brother." I said, "Yes, we have 4 bedrooms. My bedroom, Logan's bedroom, Grace's bedroom, and a playroom for my kids. There's no available room." Derek looked at me like I was the most selfish guy in the world and said, "Well, the kids can share a room. Or better yet, Lauren says there are good boarding schools around here. Maybe it's time they learn to be independent." At that moment, something broke inside me, and I told them both to get out of my house, that I wasn't going to have this conversation with them, and that Derek wasn't welcome there. Lauren became hysterical, started screaming that I was being cruel, that Derek was her brother and I was treating him like trash, that if I really loved her, I'd find a way to help her family. I told her that if she really loved me, she wouldn't be asking me to kick my kids out of their house to accommodate her irresponsible brother. Derek jumped in saying he wasn't irresponsible, that he just had bad luck, and I told him that bad luck isn't losing your job and spending all your money on alcohol. Those are bad decisions. Lauren slapped me. Yes, she slapped me in my own house, in front of Derek, and probably in front of my kids because I don't know if they were watching through the window. I told her to leave, that the relationship was over, that I wasn't going to marry someone who put her loser brother above my children. They left. Both of them. Derek dragging his suitcases and muttering things about lucky guys and big houses and selfishness, and Lauren crying and screaming that I was going to regret it. That she was the best thing that had happened to me since my wife died. Yes, she said it that cruelly. And that I was going to end up alone and miserable. I closed the door, leaned against it, and Logan came out of his room, looked at me and asked if I was okay. I told him yes, that everything was going to be fine, that Lauren wasn't going to be part of our lives anymore, and he hugged me and told me he was proud of me for standing up for him and Grace. Grace also came out of her room, a bit confused because she was younger and didn't fully understand everything that had happened, but she joined the hug, and there, we were the three of us in the entrance of our house, processing that we'd just dodged a giant bullet. But the story doesn't end there, because Lauren wasn't going to let things go that easily. Over the next few weeks, she started a harassment campaign, calling me at all hours, sending text messages saying we needed to talk, that I was being irrational, that we could find a solution if I would just listen. I blocked her number. Then she started showing up at my work, waiting for me in the parking lot, trying to talk to me, and I had to talk to security so they wouldn't let her into the building. Then she started sending messages through mutual friends, saying that I owed her money because she had paid deposits for the wedding, that we had agreed to split the costs, and I owed her like $8,000. I told her I didn't owe her anything, that she had paid those deposits without consulting me about the amounts, and that besides, the wedding wasn't going to happen, so those deposits were her problem, not mine. She threatened to sue me, but she never did. Then the rumors started. Friends started asking me if it was true that I had been abusive with Lauren, that I had pushed her during an argument, that I had yelled in front of the kids. All kinds of lies designed to make me look like the villain of the story. I had to explain to each person who asked what really happened, that she had asked me to send my kids to boarding school so her brother could move in. And most people believed me because they knew me and knew my kids and knew I would never do something like that. But some friends, especially Lauren's friends, stopped talking to me, blocked me on social media, treated me like I was a monster, and that hurt. I'm not going to lie. Losing friends because your ex is spreading lies about you is horrible. But what happened next was even crazier. Like 2 months after we broke up, I received a message from Lauren, not threatening or angry, but rather desperate, saying she needed to talk to me urgently, that Derek had done something terrible and she didn't know what to do. I didn't respond immediately because, why should I get involved in her dramas with Derek after everything that happened? But she kept sending messages, each one more desperate. And finally I asked her what had happened. She told me that Derek had stolen her credit card and emptied her bank account, that he'd taken like $15,000, and that afterwards he had completely disappeared, blocking her on everything and leaving her without a penny. She told me she had filed a police report, but that she'd probably never recover that money, and that now she was in serious financial trouble because she also had to pay those wedding deposits I mentioned before, and she didn't have anywhere to get the money from. Part of me felt sorry for her, because nobody deserves to be robbed by their own family. But the other part of me, the bigger part, thought this was pure karma, that this was exactly what happened when you prioritize toxic people over people who really loved you. I didn't respond to that message. She kept writing, saying she needed help, that maybe I could lend her money, that she knew things had ended badly between us, but that she had always been good to my kids, which was debatable, and I should help her now that she was in trouble. I responded with one and only one message saying no, that I was sorry about her situation, but I wasn't her solution, that she had made her decision when she chose Derek over me and my kids, and that now she had to live with the consequences of that decision. She showed up at my house a week later. She knocked on the door on a Sunday morning. I opened, thinking it was the food delivery guy. And there she was, with wrinkled clothes, messy hair, clearly hadn't slept well in days, and she told me to please help her, that she had no one else, that her family had abandoned her, that her friends didn't believe her about Derek. I told her I couldn't help her, that it wasn't my problem anymore, and she started crying there in my entrance, saying she had made a mistake, that she should have listened to me about Derek, that if she could turn back time she'd do things differently. I told her yes, she should have listened to me, and I closed the door. I literally closed the door in her face while she was crying, and I don't feel bad about it because she had closed the door in my face and in my kids' faces when she decided her brother was more important than us. Logan asked me afterwards who had been at the door, and I told him it was Lauren, that she had come to apologize, but it was too late for that. He nodded and said he was glad she wasn't part of our lives anymore, that he never liked how she looked at his things like they were obstacles instead of important parts of our house. And he was right. Logan was always right about her. He always saw what I didn't want to see because I was too busy trying to rebuild a normal life for us after losing his mother. Now, like 6 months after this whole mess, things are good. My kids are good. I'm good. Our house is ours again without the pressure of having to change things or make room for people who don't belong here. I'm still single, and honestly, I'm not looking for a relationship right now because I need to focus on my kids and making sure they grow up knowing that they're my #1 priority, always. I've learned that not everyone you meet is meant to stay in your life, and that sometimes the best decision you can make is to close the door on someone who's trying to push you to do something that goes against your fundamental values. Lauren still sends me messages occasionally, usually when she's drunk or desperate, saying she made a mistake or asking if we can be friends or if I can lend her money. I never respond. Derek is apparently still missing, nobody knows where he is, and he probably already spent all that money he stole from Lauren, and I'm still here, in my house, with my 2 incredible kids, watching movies on Friday nights, helping them with homework, taking them to their activities, doing all the things a father does. And that's enough for me. More than enough.